Hi, welcome to this Columbus podcast. I'm Toby Mankertz. I'm a business transformation advisor at Columbus. Today we're going to discuss how artificial intelligence and machine learning can be applied to the manufacturing industry. I'm joined by my colleagues. On my left, I have Nick Lee Trengraus, who's our head of business intelligence.
Hello.
Hello, Nick. And on my right, I've got Kevin Bull, who's our product director. Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
Hi. So it's a broad topic. We're going to try and get under the skin of it. But being a bit cynical about these things, I'm going to ask a bit of a loaded question to Kevin. Kevin, are artificial intelligence and machine learning just solutions in search of a problem?
I think we need to take that back a step and just think about what that means as a holistic view, really. So when I'm thinking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, I'm thinking really of four philosophies. I'm thinking about the insights it can deliver. And those insights might be anything. It could be anything from extracting data and just getting visualization of that, but it can also be in classifications of things and giving a risk assessment to those things as well, a categorization that says this is a high risk. That will allow us then to obviously focus in on that particular issue and do something about that. It's also about making predictions, so the crystal ball effect that everybody wants in a business. If we know what the demand is likely to be in the future, what the customers are really going to want from us, we can plan it and we can actually do anything. So those sort of predictions, taking data again, looking at the results of what those predictions might be and how that might develop in the future is really important in manufacturing. The next level on from that really is automation. So if we've got those sort of levels of insights, what do we want the systems to do? How do we want those to automate things so that we are really driving efficiency through the business as much as anything? So if we want the system, for example, to draft some sort of response to a supplier based on a late delivery, we can let systems do those and take those sort of approaches. And the final one I'd think of is really about cognitive services. So things like on the shop floor where you might use facial recognition, for example, you might use gesture control in certain environments where you don't want the operator actually moving to a keyboard and doing those sort of actions. So it's those four pillars I tend to think about when I'm thinking really about where AI and machine learning can actually be applied to manufacturing.
Would you say any one of those four is any more important than the other?
I'd probably say the predictions piece is probably one of the most important pieces, really, because if we think about predicting, if we can predict, and I said demand earlier, but if we can predict demand, that is really important because it can then allow us to think about, well, okay, on the shop floor, I'm going to sequence these production orders in a certain way. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing the most efficient way of doing things. It can be thinking about how we communicate then to our suppliers and making sure we're giving our suppliers that information to support that as well. It's about making sure that when we're thinking about the transport of our goods, we're doing that in the most optimal way because we know what we're expecting to have to deliver, so we can plan that in advance. And a lot of these things then ripple down, and sustainability is a huge issue, of course, in today's reporting world. So if we can deliver all those sort of things, they all lead into that sustainability vision as well.
Okay, so I mean, obviously that would be I agree with you, that's a very significant reason for doing that, absolutely. Nick, I just want to bring you in here at this point. What do you think about this? What you see from a more of a technical perspective of supplying solutions to these problems? What do you see as the opportunities here for AI and ML in manufacturing?
Well, Kevin makes a good point about the predictive side of things. Doing cost saving, analysing that data, all around sustainability. We also look at it through quality control as well. So looking at how we improve product quality, reducing waste, which again all ties into that sustainability bit. And how do we practically apply that? I think one of the challenges we're seeing with a lot of customers we talk to is the quality of data and the amount of data that's coming through. So when we speak to them, yes, we've got all this data, but it's in disparate data sources, it's in Excel spreadsheets, it's manually entered, it's in on-premise servers, it's in the cloud, etc., etc. Bringing all that data together to get a better view of the business and then to train those models is a real challenge for businesses at the moment in realizing those AI benefits and just realizing that the benefits from predictive maintenance, quality control using AI, etc.
Okay. I'd like to pick up on that in a little while. I think that's a really interesting point you make there about about how that technology has its strengths but also has its limits. But from a human angle first, to both of you really, we always read a lot in the press at the moment about how AI is going to replace all of our jobs in the very near future, and some jobs are more at risk than others. In the context of manufacturing, you were talking about using gestures, etc., to de-risk applications and things like that. Do you think AI, machine learning, has a high probability of replacing jobs or just enhancing jobs?
We don't have a crystal ball. It's hard to say, but from what I've seen, what I understand is I think it's not going to replace jobs, it's going to enhance jobs, increase productivity. I think it's widely known that over the last 10 years, productivity in the UK within the manufacturing, engineering industries has stagnated. But if we take a look at a study that was done in 2021 with Coca-Cola, they implemented a lot of these AI solutions to enhance productivity, and they saw a 22% increase in productivity across the factory that they did it in. No loss of headcount, but it helped people to be more productive. So there's a phrase in that, automate the boring stuff.
Right, okay. Do you know whether or not they also saw an uptick in their net promoter score? Were people happier to work under that kind of technology layer?
It took time to embed it, and there was resistance. Yeah. You'll know. You talk to a lot of people and you see a lot of resistance, because when you go in and you start talking about change, particularly technology change, people's first thought is, that's my job that's going to go. Yeah. Right? And when we talk to the customers, when you talk to customers, it's about telling them it's not about that. It's about you being more productive, you getting more value from your job, in turn, making the business more profit as well, because you're more productive.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say really the collaborative aspect is really important, and the point you raised there about the conundrum that we have in terms of productivity in the UK, it's a real issue. And this collaborative approach where you have humans working with machines, and the machines are just taking out those mundane tasks. And again, you asked about the NPS piece, about employee satisfaction. What we do see is that without AI, you are firefighting a lot all the time. Yeah. You are trying to react and trying to get things out the door and make sure that the customers get their things on time. And if the customers aren't getting what they want on time, you feel bad. You feel as though you aren't doing the greatest job. So if we can drive that sort of level of collaborative AI, using those to do things like demand planning and so forth to actually come up with accurate forecasts, it will just drive that satisfaction up as well for the employees too, as well as the customers, of course, because we are fulfilling their needs.
So people remain at the centre of everything we do. This is what I'm hearing from both of you, is that this is really important, that, yes, absolutely, you have all the technology in the world and these new novel applications for artificial intelligence and machine learning, but you've got to bring people with you on that journey. I've got a little anecdote I'd like to share, because I encountered this, this was probably about 2005, so nearly 20 years ago, and I was working in a plate mill in Brazil, and we had a system where the steel plate was produced, and we calculated using a camera the optimum cut point for the head of this bar as this plate of steel. And then you track that and you cut it and you eliminate or reduce waste on your steel production. So I went to Brazil, was there for 3 weeks. I commissioned this piece of equipment, got it all working, delivered training. I came in on my final day. I was flying home that day just to hand over and say goodbye to the guys. And I watched this operator bring a plate up, cut it where my line had said, or the machine that I put in the line said, then moved it on another couple of inches and cut it again. And I thought, that's a bit strange. And then the next plate came along and he did exactly the same thing. So I asked the guy, the supervisor, I said, why is he doing this? And he spoke to the operator and he said, your machine's been here 2 weeks, I've been here 20 years, I know where to cut a plate of steel. And I thought, okay, we've got actually the guy just feels threatened. So, and I think that's the thing, what you both said, it's not about feeling threatened. It's about how do you bring people with you to ensure that they can exploit the technology, I guess, rather than be replaced by it. Yeah. Assume. So, where do we think? So, Kevin, you've talked about demand, you've talked about risk reduction, you've talked about automation, and you've also talked about cognitive services as well. Where are the real value use cases for AI and machine learning for manufacturers today, that you could go to a CFO or a COO of a manufacturing organization and say, hey, you know what, this is where you should think about using AI. Nick, do you want to take this one first?
Yes, I think to pick up on the predictive piece. Yeah. So we think about a use case. We worked with an organisation recently just looking at possible solutions and doing proof of concepts. And one of those was looking at packaging machinery. And you can imagine if one of those machines goes down for 20 minutes, that's a lot of product that's not being produced, and that equals money, lost revenue. So one of the things we're looking at is the sensors that are on these machines, on these conveyor belts. They send a lot of data into a database, and it sits there, and they'll do some analytics on it, and someone will look at it once a month and be like, oh, we had 10 stop faults there last month. Okay, well, it's a bit late now. What can you do about that? Nothing you can do about it. So instead, it's looking at patterns within that data. What are the events that lead up to that stop fault? So you can even look back as far as say 2 weeks and start to identify patterns. Could it be changes in voltage going through the system? Could it be certain warning messages that don't equal stop events, but they're warnings that are thrown up and somebody has to manually intervene, but it doesn't produce a stop. But it's a pattern, and then you can say you build these algorithms, and then it will. There's different ones you can use, and then some will be more accurate than others, but eventually you can say, we're 90% accurate that within the next 5 days, this machine's going to stop because of X, Y, Z scenarios. So go and do something about it. And what that results in is that you don't need engineers, you don't need 20 engineers on the shop floor being reactive and walking around and being like, oh no, running over there and fixing something. Instead, they can be more proactive, and they can do more things to prevent these stop events ever happening anyway.
Yeah.
Because they can identify the patterns that lead to them.
And I guess ultimately over time you could then also optimize the amount of spare parts you carry,
yep.
because you get better understanding of rates of failure and those sorts of things. So
I've got an example there. I worked with an organisation a few years ago that built aircraft, and one of the big problems they had is that the windscreens on aircraft have a special film on them, and that film can expire, and they never knew how many windscreens they had. They just knew they needed them, so they just kept ordering them, even though they had X million pounds worth of these windscreens on the shelf that were never being used. Wow. It was like they didn't know they had them. They just thought they didn't have them, so they were just ordering them all the time. Wasting millions every year. I think the doing the rough math, it was something like £17 million a year being wasted on ordering these parts.
I think that predictivity point about equipment as well is really interesting, because a lot of businesses don't realise how cheap the actual sensors are. It's very easy to fit a sensor now and stream a stack of data that you wouldn't have had insight into at all. And it's only when you start to push this through these tools that will actually look at masses of data coming through in a real-time basis that says, yeah, there is something here. And of course, that sort of predictive maintenance is great because it actually drives up your efficiency as well. If you know the best times to do your maintenance activities that aren't going to impact on your customer deliveries, that is, again, you're driving your customer performance, you're driving your own performance, and everything for the better, really. So it's a good place to be in.
So it sounds like there's some great value cases, some probably, given size and scale and everything else, probably some decent returns on investment to be had as well, depending on the application and the context in which you apply this as well. Have you got any more recent examples of where we at Columbus have done something like this for a customer?
Yeah, we recently did some work with a food producer and distribution company, looking at demand forecasting. So that was taking their data and then running it through a number of different machine learning algorithms to see which was the most accurate, giving them different options. And that helped them to identify when there was spikes in demand or drops in demand.
Can I just come in on that point? So you said different machine learning algorithms. So we're not going in with a preconceived solution to say this is the algorithm you need for. Can you help me to understand that in a bit more detail? Just try and put that in a little bit more layman's terms for me, if you could.
I know there are different machine learning algorithms you can use to do demand forecasting and predictive kind of stuff. When we do this, we want to give the client, not just options, but reassurance that we've picked the best one. Okay. so we run the different algorithms, and then we show the results, and we say, okay, this one gave you the most accurate forecast. So that's the one you might want to think about using, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. That helps us to identify, where there was certain demand, where demand drops off, and also looking at kind of peak times as well. So it could be, the festive season, et cetera, holiday seasons.
And then do we, so with that particular algorithm which has given us the best results, I guess we could tweak that, can we? We can make that even better. Is there things that we can do to constrain some variables in that as well?
Yeah. There are things you can do to the algorithms to help make them more accurate. And the point of it is that let's take bananas for example, right? So they order 600 grams worth of bananas, and then they end up throwing away 200 grams worth. Right. So if you extrapolate that across all the product ranges, across all of the different stores they distribute to, it's millions of pounds in waste saved. And then it's starting to look at kind of thinking about AI, and we're still early days into AI. Machine learning's been around a long time, but it's looking at AI as not just cost saver, but a revenue generator as well. Right. So it's not just saving you money, but it's actually, okay, what are the products that sell well during this period? What are the products that don't sell well? Let's order less of those, more of those. Let's get those on the shelves. So it's think about it more as a revenue generator.
Okay. What are our results?
The early results were, the organisation was wasting something like £5 million a year on throwing stuff away on waste, and using the algorithms that we did, it was halving that. And that was just on the early days. So as you start to tweak those algorithms, as more data comes through and it learns more, it's got more data to learn on. Then you're going to expect that to get even closer and closer and reduce that wastage.
Thank you. That was interesting to see the application of machine learning and the burgeoning applications of AI that could be seen in manufacturing. Kevin, what would you add to that?
I think it's interesting how the supply chain part of this reacts, because we've been talking about how we fulfill demand, how we manufacture something to meet demand, but think about where the materials come from, the bananas in that particular example that Nick had there. If we've got some sensors, either in the field for crops or on the container ships as these bananas being brought across the Atlantic, then we may be starting to actually get measurements on there about the quality of that produce. Mm-hmm. And that quality of that produce directly affects the yield of that, which it directly affects what we can fulfill in terms of our customer demands. So that's all very interesting in sort of trying to get that information. Maybe you've got sensors in fields, for example, that are looking at the temperature of the soil or the consistency of the soil or the nutrients in the soil. You may be looking at other weather patterns that have occurred in there as well. So in those sort of industries where we are thinking about food manufacturing as an example, the yield of that is really important. So the quality is key to that as well. If we've got that information in advance, we can start to think about where we can best use that and drive that to particular customer areas. For example, a customer might want the very best quality, others are happy to accept lesser quality. So we can optimize that consumption of those materials as well. Combining that with the demand planning side, combining that with the yield of the materials coming through, you're getting a different picture there, a more detailed picture, a more accurate picture that can reduce waste.
So this is really kind of end-to-end supply chain management, field to fork kind of.
It is, and AI has got a role to play in all of that, and it's also the change management piece. If a purchase order is going to be delayed, if a supplier says I can't fulfil that for that date, but I can fulfil it for this date, what is the risk? What is the risk to you? What is the impact to your business as a result of that? And the tools are there now that will say, look, this is a high risk. These are the things that are going to be impacted, and these are the customers that are going to be shortage of produce effectively. So again, it's coming back to that customer service. If we're delivering better customer service, we're delivering more efficiency in our supply chain and in our factories, that is all good news.
So essentially, I guess also you could run a few scenarios. You could run some near real-time simulations of fluctuations in demand and the impact, and where I guess you could proactively look for weak spots in your supply
Absolutely,
chain.
and the human aspect of this has to come into play. People have got to pick up on that and say, I think I want to do a scenario, I want to model something, and this is the model that I think I want to do. So I know a ship gets stuck in the Suez again. What is the impact of that? I just want to model that to see what would happen if it reoccurred. The resilience and agility in the supply chain that manufacturers absolutely crucially need nowadays. they're great tools to actually model those and just see what the actual
Your
impact is.
risk management techniques improve, your whole ability to forecast different scenarios, you're just more robust as an organisation. Yeah. I mean, this all sounds like utopia, you know, it sounds ideal, this is great. If we look around manufacturing and in our collective experience, no doubt we've seen good and bad examples of manufacturing organisations, and some who are perhaps more technologically advanced than others. But what are just turning the other side of that coin, if we were to be successful in applying technology to our manufacturing organisations, what are the building blocks? What's got to be in place first for that to be the case?
Inspiration.
Inspiration, okay.
Inspiration.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there are a lot of manufacturers out there that are starting to hear the term AI and they're starting to get excited about it, but have they got use case scenarios? Probably not a lot have. But they perhaps don't appreciate what it can do, for one, but they need to think about their data and what they've got available to them and what they might need to drive out of that. You know, we're talking about a load of use case scenarios here, but there's hundreds of them that we could start to go down the routes of. But each business will have its own different sets of data. It'll have its own different sets of points within that they need to address these particular issues.
Interesting point, Kevin. Really interesting stuff around data. Thank you both very much for your time. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this insightful and interesting, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.